My father said it into a microphone. Tyler is ready to lead this company. Dana was only ever the placeholder. 41 people heard him say it. I counted them later, one by one, from the seating chart, because counting was easier than crying. Caterers heard it. Our accountant of 19 years heard it. The mayor's office liaison, who had come to present my father with a Small Business of the Year plaque, heard it. My husband heard it, and he put his hand flat on my back, the way you'd steady something that was about to fall. My name is Dana Marsh. I am 34 years old. This is the story of how my parents built me into the load-bearing wall of a company for 9 years, and then texted me 11 words asking me to step outside so they could tear the wall down. What they didn't know, standing at that podium under string lights they hadn't paid for, was that I had already signed the paper that would end them. They just didn't know it yet. Neither did I, not really, not until 3 weeks later, when I finally understood what the word placeholder was going to cost them. This is that story. Our house sat at the top of Larkspur Hill in Danville, the kind of 2-acre lot with a circular gravel driveway that crunched under tires in a way my mother found elegant. The house itself was a monument to my grandfather, Walter Marsh, who had started Marsh Construction Group in 1968 with a single flatbed truck and a promise to his wife that he'd never ask another man for a raise. By the time I was born, the company had grown into a regional name, 6 crews, for regional offices, a reputation for finishing commercial builds on time in a business where that reputation was worth more than the equipment. My father, Robert Marsh, inherited the company at 42, the same year my brother Tyler was born. I was 3 at the time. My mother, Carol, liked to say that the company and Tyler arrived in the same season, like the universe was making room. She said it fondly. She said it often. She said it at my wedding, actually, during her toast, and I remember watching my new husband's face rearrange itself into something polite and confused, the face of a man realizing for the first time exactly what he had married into. There was a hierarchy in our house, and it was never spoken aloud as a rule, but it governed every dinner, every holiday, every school project taped to the refrigerator. Tyler's report cards went on the fridge. Mine went in a drawer, for safekeeping. Tyler's Little League trophies lined the mantel, my debate team trophies, and there were 11 of them by the time I graduated, lived on a bookshelf in the hallway outside the laundry room, where the lighting was bad and nobody lingered. The kitchen smelled like my mother's rosemary chicken most Sunday nights, and under that, faintly, like the cedar drawer liners she replaced every spring. That smell, rosemary and cedar, is still, to this day, the smell of being unimportant in a room full of people who loved someone else more. I want to be precise about what favoritism looked like in practice, because the word gets used so loosely it stops meaning anything. It looked like this. When I made the National Merit Scholarship semi-finalist list, my father said, "That's great, honey," without looking up from the estimate he was drafting for a strip mall in Pleasant Hill. When Tyler, 2 years later, was cut from the varsity baseball team, my father drove to the school and spent 40 minutes in the coach's office. Tyler made the team the following week. I never found out what was said in that office. I only know the shape of what it taught both of us. Tyler learned that consequences were negotiable, and I learned that mine were not. By the time I was 22, I had a business degree from UC Davis, magna cum laude, and a standing invitation, never quite an offer, to help out around the office at Marsh Construction Group. Tyler, at 20, had dropped out of Chico State after 3 semesters and was given the title of assistant project manager, a company truck, and a corner office with a window, all in the same month. I took the invitation anyway. I told myself it was because I loved the company, and that was true. I also took it because some stubborn, unkillable part of me still believed that if I worked hard enough, and long enough, and well enough, the ranking system would eventually correct itself. That belief cost me 9 years. I started as a project coordinator, which is a polite title for the person who makes sure permits get filed before deadlines and subcontractors get paid before they walk off a job site. I was good at it. I was, if I'm being plain about it, exceptional at it. Within 18 months I had reorganized the entire bidding process, cutting the average proposal turnaround from 11 days to 4. Within 3 years I was managing our 2 largest commercial accounts. Within 6 years I held the title of Vice President of Operations, and I held the company together in every way that mattered, while my brother Tyler held the title of Project Director and, most weeks, a golf club. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because it's the truth, and this story only makes sense if you understand exactly how much of the truth I was carrying by myself. My mother had her own ranking system layered on top of my father's. Hers was quieter, and in some ways crueler, because it dressed itself up as concern. You work too hard, Dana. You're going to end up alone. She said this to me at my own rehearsal dinner, 2 years into my marriage, while my husband Marcus stood 4 feet away, holding a glass of champagne he'd toasted with an hour earlier. Tyler, meanwhile, was praised for his ambition for the exact same hours logged, though his hours, unlike mine, rarely produced anything you could put a dollar figure on. There was a family group chat. It was called, without irony, Team Marsh. I was in it. I was, for years, the only person in that chat who answered work emergencies at 2 a.m., who drove 90 minutes to a job site in Vacaville because a foundation inspection had gone sideways and Tyler wasn't answering his phone. I want you to hold on to that group chat. It becomes important later. Everything I'm telling you about the architecture of this family, the mantle, the drawer, the corner office, the group chat, is a wall I built without knowing I was building it, brick by brick, so that when it finally came down, you would understand exactly how much weight it had been carrying. The first scene I want to tell you about happened on a Tuesday in March, 4 years ago, in the second-floor conference room at our Walnut Creek office, the one with the long walnut table my grandfather had built himself in 1974. I had just closed a $2.3 million contract for a medical office complex in San Ramon, the largest single contract in company history at that point, after 4 months of negotiation with a developer who had already walked away from 2 competing bids. I presented the signed contract at our Monday operations meeting. 12 people in the room. My father skimmed the summary page, nodded once, and said, "Good. Tyler, where are we on the Concord permits?" That was it. No congratulations. No acknowledgement that I had just delivered the single most significant win in the company's 56-year history. I sat there with the folder still open in front of me and felt something small and hot lodge itself behind my sternum. I said nothing. I closed the folder. I moved to the next agenda item, because that is what you do when you are the person who is supposed to keep the meeting on schedule, even the meeting that just quietly erased you. The second scene happened 8 months later, at Thanksgiving, at the house on Larkspur Hill. 22 people around 3 connected tables, aunts, cousins, my grandfather's 2 surviving sisters, my father's golf partners who'd become family over the decades. My father stood to give the traditional toast he gave every year, the one where he talked about Walter Marsh's flatbed truck and the promise of the family name. That year, he added something new. He raised his glass toward Tyler and said, "And to my son, who's going to take this company into its next 50 years. 22 people raised their glasses. I raised mine too, because what else do you do, sitting 3 feet from your own erasure with a gravy boat in front of you and your husband's hand finding your knee under the table? My father did not mention me in that toast. Not once. Not the San Ramon contract, not the 4-year streak of on-time project completions I'd overseen, not the fact that I had, by that point, been functionally running the company's daily operations for 6 years while Tyler ran late to site visits in a truck the company paid for. I said nothing that night either. I helped my mother clear the dessert plates. I remember the specific weight of the pumpkin pie dish in my hands, still warm, and thinking, with a kind of dull clarity, I am the only person in this family who is allowed to be tired. The third scene is the one that still visits me in the middle of the night sometimes, uninvited. It was my daughter's 4th birthday party, in June, in our backyard in Alamo, 16 kids, a rented bounce house, a taco truck Marcus had booked as a surprise. My mother arrived 40 minutes late, no gift, and spent the first 20 minutes of the party on her phone. I found her, eventually, standing near the fence, scrolling. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Tyler and Brooke are looking at a house in Danville," she said, still looking at her phone. "4 bedrooms. Your father's going to help with the down payment." She looked up then, almost as an afterthought. "This is a nice little party, by the way." "A nice little party." "My daughter's 4th birthday, described the way you'd describe a decent parking spot." I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because false composure isn't the same as strength, and I never want to pretend I felt nothing. I felt something crack, quietly, somewhere behind my ribs. And then I smiled, because the taco truck line was forming and somebody needed to organize the piñata, and that somebody, as always, was me. The 4th scene, the one that finally tipped the scale, happened 14 months ago, in that same second-floor conference room, on a Thursday afternoon in April. We were pitching for the largest contract in company history, a $4.2 million data center support facility in Fairfield, the kind of project that would put Marsh Construction Group in a different weight class entirely. I had spent 5 months on it. I had personally rewritten our safety compliance documentation, restructured our subcontractor network for the specialized electrical work, and flown to Austin twice to walk the client's existing facility so I could speak their language in the room. The pitch meeting was scheduled for a Friday. On Thursday, my father called a meeting to align on messaging. 10 of us in the conference room. He opened his laptop, pulled up the slide deck, my slide deck, the one I'd built over 5 months, and said, "Tyler's going to lead the presentation tomorrow. I think it's time he steps into more of a front-facing role." I sat very still. I remember the exact temperature of the room, which was too cold, because the building's HVAC had been overcorrecting for a heat wave all week. I said, "I've built the entire relationship with their VP of facilities. He knows me. He doesn't know Tyler." My father didn't look up from his laptop. "It'll be good experience for him." Tyler, to his credit, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Brooke, sitting beside him, did not. She said, brightly, "This is such a great opportunity for you, babe," loud enough for the room to hear, as though she were narrating a nature documentary about her own husband's undeserved ascension. I said one sentence. "I'll send him my notes tonight." Then I gathered my folder, walked to my office, closed the door, and sat at my desk for 11 minutes without moving, because I needed those 11 minutes to remember how to breathe like a person who still had a spine. That was the inciting act. Not the loudest moment. Not the cruelest sentence. Just the moment the math finally became undeniable. 9 years, 1 company, 1 wall holding up a roof that would never once say my name out loud in front of witnesses. I didn't cry in that office. I want to say that plainly, because I think people expect the breaking point to look like sobbing at a desk, and mine didn't look like that. It looked like stillness. I sat with my hands flat on the desk. I looked at the framed photo on my shelf, me at 26, hard hat on, standing in front of the San Ramon site with my father's arm around my shoulder, the one time he'd let a photographer catch him proud of me. I looked at it for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and made a folder. I named it, simply, Fairfield. Inside it, I moved copies of every email I'd sent the client. Every draft of the slide deck, timestamped. The safety compliance rewrite with my name in the document properties. I didn't know yet what the folder was for. I only knew that I was done being the only person in this family who kept records of her own existence. I sent Tyler my notes that night, as promised. 31 pages. I did not simplify them. I did not soften the technical language. If he was going to stand in front of that client wearing my 5 months of work, he was going to have to actually read it first. I went home. I kissed my daughter goodnight. I did not tell Marcus everything, not yet, just that it had been a hard day. He knew better than to push. He'd learned, over 6 years of marriage, that I processed things on my own schedule, and that when I was ready to talk, I talked. That night, lying awake next to him, I made a decision. Not a plan yet, just a decision, small and hard as a stone in my pocket. I was done asking this family to see me. I was going to make sure they couldn't look away. The Fairfield pitch happened on a Friday. Tyler, reading from my notes with the confidence of a man who'd skimmed them twice, misquoted the load-bearing specifications for the server room subfloor. The client's VP of facilities, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya Nair, who I'd spent 5 months building trust with, caught the error immediately and asked a follow-up question Tyler couldn't answer. He looked, 3 separate times, toward the back of the room where I sat, silent, because my father had insisted I attend for support. We didn't lose the contract that day. We lost momentum. Priya emailed me directly that evening, "Can we set up a call, just the 2 of us, before we finalize anything?" I didn't show that email to my father. I was done handing him things he hadn't earned. The following Monday, I called the one person who had believed in me since before I could walk a job site in heels, my grandfather's younger brother, my great-uncle Frank Delgado, not blood to the Marsh name, but married in, and the only person in that family who had ever, in 9 years, asked me what I wanted instead of what I was owed. Frank was 71, a retired construction attorney who had drafted half of Marsh Construction Group's original incorporation documents back when my grandfather still had grease under his fingernails. I met Frank at his kitchen table in Martinez 2 days later, with the Fairfield folder and a legal pad. I laid it all out, the 9 years, the equity structure, the fact that I held 18% of company shares from a restructuring in my 20s that my father had done for tax reasons and, I suspect, never expected me to understand the actual power of. Frank listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of gift. "Do you know what you actually own?" he asked, when I finished. I didn't, not fully. Frank spent the next 2 hours walking me through the operating agreement my father had signed 12 years earlier, when the company restructured from a sole proprietorship into Marsh Construction Group LLC. 18% to me. 11% to Tyler. The remaining 71% split between my parents. Standard, on paper. Except for one clause, buried on page 14, that Frank had actually written himself back when my grandfather was still alive and paranoid about protecting the people who did the real work, a clause requiring unanimous approval from any shareholder holding more than 15% equity for any contract exceeding $2 million. I held 18%. The Fairfield contract was worth $4.2 million. They needed my signature. They had never once needed it before, because I had never once withheld it before. I had signed everything they put in front of me for 9 years without reading the fine print, because I trusted them, and because withholding my signature had simply never occurred to me as a form of power. "They don't know you know this," Frank said. It wasn't a question. "No," I said. "They don't." Over the next 3 weeks, I did 4 things, quietly, methodically, the way I'd run every project of my career. First, I had Frank formally review and confirm the clause with an independent read of the operating agreement, so I wasn't operating on one attorney's opinion alone. I paid for a second opinion from a corporate attorney in Oakland named Renata Vasco, who confirmed it in writing. My signature was legally required for the Fairfield contract to close. Second, I finished the deal with Priya Nair myself. I called her the following week, told her plainly that there had been an internal miscommunication about presentation roles, and asked for 30 minutes to walk her through the subfloor specifications correctly. She gave me the 30 minutes. I didn't need all of it. By the end of the call, she said, "I was hoping you'd be the one handling this. I have that email saved. I will always have that email saved." Third, I documented everything, every slight, every meeting where my work was reassigned, every year of performance reviews where I'd been rated, exceeds expectations, while receiving raises smaller than Tyler's, whose reviews averaged, meets expectations. I built a single document, 41 pages, with dates, dollar figures, and email timestamps. I called it, in my own head, the ledger. It included the $2.3 million San Ramon contract with my name on the signature line. It included 9 years of performance reviews. It included the salary discrepancy, I discovered, going through old HR records I had access to as VP of Operations, that Tyler's base salary had been $34,000 higher than mine for the past 4 years, for a role with less than half my direct revenue responsibility. Fourth, and this was the part that took the most courage, more than any spreadsheet, I told Marcus everything. All of it. The 9 years. The clause. The ledger. He listened the way Frank had listened, without interrupting, and when I finished he said only, "What do you need from me?" Not "what should you do?" Not "are you sure?" What do you need? I told him I needed him beside me when it happened, and nothing more. He said he'd be there. I set a date. The company's annual holiday gala was in 3 weeks, the same event, held every December at the Blackhawk Country Club, where my father had, for the past 6 years running, used the podium to announce the coming year's leadership priorities to the assembled staff, clients, and board advisors. 41 people would be in that room this year, according to the final RSVP count I pulled myself, because I still, technically, managed event logistics. I didn't confront my father before the gala. I didn't threaten. I didn't warn. I simply waited, with a signed second legal opinion in a folder, an executed side letter from Priya Nair's company confirming she wanted to finalize the Fairfield contract only with my direct involvement as project lead, and 18% of a company that could not close its biggest deal in history without my signature on a line my father had forgotten I could read. The gala was in the Blackhawk Ballroom, string lights strung across dark wood beams, 41 guests in cocktail attire, a jazz trio in the corner playing something low and unbothered. My father took the podium at 8:15 p.m., the way he did every year, to toast the company's future. He talked about Walter Marsh's flatbed truck. He talked about 56 years. And then he said it, the line I opened this story with, the line that had apparently been sitting in his chest for months, maybe years, waiting for an audience big enough to make it land. Tyler is ready to lead this company. Dana was only ever the placeholder. I felt Marcus's hand find my back. I felt 41 faces, in various states of discomfort, not quite meeting my eyes. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I walked to the podium. My father, to his credit, stepped aside, assuming, I think, that I was going to say something gracious, something that would smooth over the moment the way I had smoothed over every moment for 9 years. I said, "I have something to add, if that's all right." I opened the folder. I did not read all 41 pages. I didn't need to. I said, in April, I was removed from presenting the Fairfield contract, the largest deal in this company's history, a contract I spent 5 months building, so that my brother could have, and I'm quoting my father directly here, front-facing experience. That contract is worth $4.2 million. It cannot close without my signature, because I hold 18% equity in this company, and our operating agreement, which my father signed, and which I have had independently reviewed by 2 attorneys, requires unanimous shareholder approval above 15% for any deal of that size. The room had gone very quiet. Priya Nair, who I had personally invited as a guest 3 weeks earlier, without telling my father, stood near the bar with her arms crossed, watching. I said, "I've withheld that signature for 3 weeks. I'm prepared to keep withholding it." I looked at my father, not my mother, not Tyler. Just him. "You called me a placeholder in front of 41 people. I'd like the record to reflect that the placeholder built this company's future, signed its largest contract personally with the client's direct request, and is the only reason any of you are still standing in this room with a deal worth closing." My father's face did something I had never once seen it do in 34 years. It went pale, then blotchy at the collar, the particular color of a man doing fast arithmetic he does not like the answer to. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out for a full 3 seconds, an eternity, at a podium, in front of your own board advisors. Priya Nair crossed the room and stood beside me. She said, to the room, simply, I want to confirm, our firm is only proceeding with this contract with Dana as lead. That was communicated to Marsh Construction Group in writing 2 weeks ago. She looked at my father. I assumed you'd seen the email. I hadn't shown him the email. I let that land exactly the way it needed to. My mother, from the second table, said my name once, quietly, Dana, in the tone she used when she wanted a scene to end. I looked at her too, and I said the only other thing I said that night, 5 words, the ones I'd been building toward for 3 weeks without knowing it, I'm done stepping away, Mom. Then I closed the folder, thanked the room for their time, and walked back to my table, where Marcus stood and pulled my chair out, and I sat down, and the jazz trio, God bless them, kept playing, because somebody in that room understood that the show still had to go on, even after the truth had just walked through it wearing heels. The text came 4 days later. Sunday morning, 9:12 a.m. My mother's name on the screen. 11 words. We think it's best you step away for now. We'll talk soon. No call. No conversation. 9 years, reduced to a text message sent, I later learned, from the passenger seat of my father's truck on the way to church, as though I were a subscription they'd decided to cancel. I did not respond right away. I made coffee. I sat at my own kitchen table, in my own house, with my own name on the mortgage, and I let the quiet settle before I did anything at all. I didn't fight the removal. I let it stand, because by then it didn't matter. I had already spoken to Frank about a formal buyout of my 18%, and Priya Nair's firm, as it turned out, had a policy question of their own. They wanted to know whether Dana Marsh, specifically, would still be reachable as an independent consultant if the ownership situation continued to be unstable. I told her yes. I meant it. Over the following 8 weeks, the Fairfield contract closed, not through Marsh Construction Group, but through a new entity Frank helped me register in January, a firm I named Delgado Marsh Project Advisory, in honor of the one person who had never once needed a group text to know my worth. Priya Nair's company signed with us directly, a $4.2 million relationship that had, in the end, never really belonged to my father at all. It belonged to 5 months of my work and 1 honest phone call. Marsh Construction Group did not collapse. I want to be honest about that too, because revenge stories like to pretend the other side burns to the ground, and that isn't what happened here. My father is still the majority owner. Tyler is still a project director, though 2 of his senior staff left within 6 months, quietly, for reasons that had everything to do with what they'd watched happen to me and nothing to do with subtlety. The company lost the Fairfield contract, and with it, roughly $380,000 in projected annual servicing revenue that would have come from the ongoing facilities relationship. They have not landed a contract of that size since. My mother called in February. She cried on the phone, the real kind, not the performative kind she'd used at the gala. She said she didn't understand how things had gotten so out of hand. I told her, gently, that nothing had gotten out of hand, that everything had simply, finally, become visible. She apologized, in her way, though her apology was mostly about the group chat, about how she should have handled the text differently. She did not apologize for the 9 years underneath it. Some people can only reach as far as the last 5 minutes of a decade. I've had to make peace with that. My father has not called. He sent one email, in March, forwarded from his assistant's account, asking whether I'd be open to a conversation about consulting rates for future Marsh projects. I read it twice. I did not respond. Some doors don't need slamming. They just need to stay exactly the width they were left at. Tyler texted once, in April, a single line, I didn't know about the equity thing, for what it's worth. I believe him, actually. I don't think Tyler ever built the ranking system he benefited from. I think he was just the person standing closest to the trophy shelf when they decided where the good lighting would go. That doesn't erase what happened. It just means my anger, these days, has a different shape than his. I run Delgado Marsh Project Advisory out of a small office in Danville now, for employees, for clients, a revenue projection for this year that Frank still can't quite believe, given that we started with a single laptop and a folder named Fairfield. I kept the folder name. I like walking past it in my file directory every day. It reminds me what stillness can build, if you let it work long enough. I lost a mantle. I lost a group chat. I lost the particular, specific comfort of believing my parents would someday notice me without my having to hand them a legal document to do it. I want to be honest that this loss is real, and some days it still finds me, usually around the holidays, usually around a smell of rosemary that has nothing to do with anyone's cooking anymore, just memory doing what memory does. But I gained something I didn't expect to gain, which is this: I stopped waiting to be seen, and I started building things that couldn't be unseen. A contract with my name on the signature line. A company with my name in the title. A daughter who will grow up watching her mother close a folder instead of swallowing a sentence. My father called me a placeholder once, in front of 41 people, standing under string lights he never paid for himself. He was wrong about the word, but he was right about one thing: without meaning to be, I had been holding a place. I'd just been holding it for the wrong family. I've since found the right one: Marcus, my daughter, Frank, and a small office in Danville with my own name on the lease. I am not a placeholder. I never was. I was the foundation the whole time, and it only took them 9 years, one podium, and one very quiet folder to finally see what they'd been standing on.